Hi. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm very new to this public speaking, and Colorblind Cards is something that's very close to my heart, so I'm just going to speak freestyle. 10 years ago, as you've just been told, I was 17 and about 8 weeks pregnant, and my mum had just broken the news to my dad. And he looks at me with tears in his eyes and he said, "Now, all you're ever going to be is a statistic." And at the time, I believed him, but I think subconsciously that obviously had a huge effect on me. And even before Monet's birth, I set about putting the wheels into motion to be anything but a statistic. I started out, she was born, I think, when she was 4 months old, I went back to college, did my A-levels, picked up an A in literature and a B in sociology, and went straight to university. I'd always enjoyed writing, and by this point I decided I wanted to be a journalist, so I completed my BA honours in journalism, and basically spent that 3 years devoting 3 days to university, 2 days work experience. I spent a day working for BBC London Radio, where they subsequently offered me a job, and I acted as entertainment correspondent whilst I was at university. The other weekday was spent working for a magazine called Pride, which some of you may recognise me. I've continued to have a column for them. And that was my degree. I spent my weekends working in Russell and Bromley, and for 3 years I worked 7 days a week. And by the time I graduated, I had a job waiting for me at Pride and also BBC London, which I continue to do on the weekend. I'd also spent some time working for the publicist Max Clifford as an intern, and he was someone that was very supportive to me. And after spending 3 years very successfully as senior staff writer at Pride, he offered me a job. So I went straight over to Max and continued to do my radio. Always been a grafter, I guess. And 2.5 years in, after working full-time for Max, I decided I wanted to start my own business, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I didn't know where this idea was going to come from. This is my daughter, Monet. I was looking for a card for Monet one day, and I work in Mayfair, and I walked the length of Oxford Street and looked at all the department stores, all the independent card shops, your Debenhams, your John Lewis, I might as well out them, your Clintons, your Cards Galore, and I couldn't find one card featuring a child or adult of mixed race, Asian, black descent. And I thought, wow, that's a huge business opportunity, but also on a social level, that doesn't really make any sense in 2006 at the time. So I started to think about how I could come up with a concept with a range which would have mass appeal to everybody, and also be ethnically inclusive. I didn't want to create a range which would be about ethnicity, because I don't think we're defined by our race, but I wanted to effectively put black cards on high street shelves. So I went home and I discussed it with my daughter, who was above your average intelligence for a 6-year-old, as she was at the time. And we came up with this together, with this name, Colorblind Cards. And everything happened very quickly from that point. I was still working for Max, but we set up a website, and I spoke to a photography contact of mine, Nina Duncan, who loved the concept and supported me wholeheartedly. She actually offered to do the very first photo shoot for free, and kind of said, you know, if it works, then we'll come to an arrangement. And this is the photographer to the Queen, so I really had some good people behind me. And we came up with the idea, and we had a very natural shoot and let the kids play. We started off with children initially. And the result was some really beautiful images, and I paired them with inspirational captions, because I've always wanted to inspire. You know, my own story's fairly strong. And I wanted to encourage other young people from disadvantaged backgrounds and even not from disadvantaged backgrounds to basically follow their academic and business dreams, and I wanted to pass that message on. So the range was born, and we walked into our first independent stockist, which was a little boutique called Worldly, Wicked and Wise. That was August 2006, and I said, "What do you think?" And the owner turned around to me and said, this is amazing. This is what people are always asking me for. I'll order, I think it was 100 on the spot. And I remember Monet and I walked out of the store and I burst into tears. And she was like, oh, mummy, for goodness sake. And it kind of went from there. I mean, my vision very early on was to get a presence in the high street, because that was what was so obviously lacking. And we achieved that 9 months in, really just through sheer knocking down doors. I learned very early on that you had to attend the trade fairs. You couldn't just call up, you couldn't send emails, you really needed to be persistent, and you needed to just show that you had a presence, a strong presence, and you weren't going to be a company that was going to fold after a couple of years. So we were very lucky in that I managed to persuade Clinton's to offer me a trial. The challenge, Clinton's are the market leader for greeting cards in the UK. They have over 700 stores. And the challenge was that they weren't convinced that anyone other than a black person would buy a card with a black person on it, which I felt was bizarre, because effectively, you know, we're people first and foremost, and as I said, the cards aren't about ethnicity, so I couldn't understand, and I really had to be quite determined in getting them to give me a shot. So they trialled 16 designs across 10 stores initially, and we had sales targets which we had to meet for 3 months, and we exceeded them all. In some cases, you know, we doubled the target figures in places like Oxford Street and Brent Cross. And the result was that they decided to roll us out across 70 stores initially, and that will increase to 130 in 2 months. And that really is, I mean, at this stage we're in, 70 branches of Clinton Cards, 50 independents. We have just been taken on by the US's the United States' biggest distributor, and they are about to launch Colorblind at the New York Stationery Show in May, and they, from there on, will be represented across the states in LA and Chicago and Texas and across all the main states, and so our global presence will effectively be in place as of May. We're also in talks with Canada, and the wonderful thing is that there is definitely a global gap in the market for a range like this, believe it or not. And where was I? and that's where it is really. You know, I've just, up until this point, I've still been juggling my full-time job with the company. And I actually handed my notice in and said to Max, you know, I've really got to go now because it's kind of taking off and I can't survive on 4 hours sleep anymore. And obviously he tried to get me to stay, but so as of next month I will be in full-time business. And I'm also about to launch Colorblind Public Relations, because I don't want to let that 10 years of media experience go to waste. And so I work across the 2 companies. I'm not sure what else there is to say. I mean, I think it was last month that I knocked on the door of number 10 Downing Street, and I'd been invited to attend a roundtable discussion about enterprise with the Prime Minister, and this was a result of one of the 6 awards that I picked up last year, the Enterprising Young Brit Award. And I kind of thought, wow, you know, look at what, you know, perseverance and resilience and self-belief, I guess, because you have to really believe in yourself. Lots of people, the publisher at Pride magazine, who's, you know, a multi-millionaire businessman, said to me, I'm not really sure there's a big enough market for something like this, when I ran my idea past him. And I've come up against that a lot. You really have to sort of dig very deep and believe in your vision, and then you make it, I guess.